Thanks, Joe. All right, thank you all so much for joining me on this special, brief, abbreviated Saber gathering here. And my presentation is pretty simple. It's a fun, lighthearted one in a sense. It's the history of the Colorado Rockies and Baseball Hall of Fame voting. Larry Walker, Todd Helton, Jim Leyland. Presentation is over. No, it's not that simple. It's a little bit more than that. That's kind of why I wanted to dive into some things for the diehards that are Rockies fans, and take you back first to the creation of the Baseball Hall of Fame and its connections to Colorado. Abner Doubleday, of course, is credited with inventing baseball. He gained some minor fame as an important general in some Civil War battles. Again, credited with inventing the game in a cow pasture in Cooperstown, New York in 1839. In 1839, Colorado was still 22 years away from becoming its own territory, 37 years from becoming its own state. Now, Henry Chadwick, Hall of Famer, is believed that the game has evolved from the game of rounders, and we now know that really to be true. It's really accepted now at this point. But at the time, in the late 1800s, Albert G. Spalding said it was an American invention, and that obviously helped his cause for selling Spalding sporting equipment. Albert G. Spalding, helped agree to start up the Mills Commission, which was overseen by the National League president at the time, Albert G. Mills, in 1905 to determine the truth. A lot of national publications got the word out for any American that knew any information on the origins of baseball. Send in some information, and believe it or not, a 71-year-old mining engineer from Denver, Colorado, also named Abner Graves, responded, and immediately what his letter contained was published, and it said, Abner Doubleday invented baseball. The claim was not investigated at all, and it was just accepted. So the Hall of Fame was going to be in Cooperstown, and it was dedicated June 12th, 1939, a little over 85 years ago. In fact, first class, 5 members, that came in 1936. So they had to wait about 3 years before they could actually get the Hall of Famers there in Cooperstown. Babe Ruth, Cy Young, Ty Cobb, Christy Mathewson, and Walter Johnson. All right, so how does one get on the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot? Now, the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot is actually the BBWAA ballot, the Baseball Writers Association of America, the ballot for the baseball writers, right? First, you have to have 10 years of service time at minimum. From there, you basically got to be one of the best 25 to 40 players in the game to even make the ballot, which is an honor. That's an extreme honor to just make a ballot. If you receive 5% when you're on the ballot, you come back for another year. For a while, it was 15 years you could be on the ballot. But since 2015, since there was some cluttering of a lot of people being on the ballots, 10 years was decided as the maximum. Now, if you didn't play for 10 years or you didn't play in the majors at all, there have been veterans committees that allow you to be elected to the Hall of Fame. Believe it or not, only a little more than 40% of Hall of Famers have been elected in that traditional way by the Baseball Writers Association of America. 139 Hall of Famers played the game. They fit the format of minimum of 10 years of service time and received 75% of votes. So that leaves an additional 207 members. Almost 60% have gotten in on some kind of veterans committee. This year's class of 2024, gives us 346 members in the Hall of Fame. We got Joe Mauer and Adrian Beltre getting in on their first ballot, Todd Helton getting in on his 6th ballot, and Jim Leyland, who got in through a veterans committee. I'll get to him a little bit more in a second. So let's dig into the Rockies, the Colorado Rockies. We think of the first Hall of Famer, of course, as being Larry Walker. And, if you do the math, you have to be retired for 5 years before you can even be on a ballot. Yes, you got to be retired for 5 years, but then you are on a ballot that opens in December, but you don't get in the next year. So really the math is 5 plus that 1. So for me, whenever I think of a guy's last year, I just add 6 years to tell me when, what summer that guy is going to get in. So if the first year of the Rockies is 93, you add 6, 1999 would be the earliest you would get a player on a ballot. And that's absolutely correct. That's Dale Murphy, for the few amount of games that he was with the Rockies, was the first player. However, there have been earlier Rockies on the ballot. Let me slow things down just a little bit. Now, 43 different Rockies over the course of the 30 plus years that the Rockies have been in existence. 43 different players have appeared on the ballot. They played with the Rockies in some capacity, but there's also 9 different coaches who have been featured because of their performances during their playing career, and only one Rockies manager never played in the majors. That's Jim Leyland, and he's actually the one that's in the Hall of Fame. So Larry Walker, Todd Helton, first members of the Rockies organization to be featured in the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. But the first 9, believe it or not, the first 9 were actually coaches. The first member of the Rockies, you could say, that was featured on a Hall of Fame ballot was featured 3 years before the Rockies' first ever game. 1993, their hitting coach was Amos Otis, and he was on Hall of Fame ballot in 1990, before we even knew we were going to have Major League Baseball in Denver. After that, in 1991, you had the hitting coach in 95, Art Howe, on a ballot. Rich Dower was also on that 91 ballot. He was a third base coach for the Rockies in 2009 through 2012. In 1992, Toby Harrah, who was a bench coach, and he managed, I want to say, 4 games. At the time, I think it was Buddy Bell, who got suspended or was unable to manage. He was the bench coach from 2000 to 2002. He was on the 92 ballot. Then in 1994, while he was managing the Colorado Rockies, Don Baylor was on a ballot, received 2.6% of votes. Baylor also came back and managed, or rather was the hitting coach in 2009 to 2010 for those 2 years. And tomorrow would actually have been his 75th birthday. So early happy birthday to Don Baylor. In 1995, a couple years before he would be the manager of the Rockies, Buddy Bell was on a ballot. And then in 1997, you had both Dwight Evans and Ken Griffey Sr. on ballots. And finally, in 1998, Carney Lansford, who was the hitting coach in 2011. So retroactively, we'll credit him as being a Rocky in a sense. But then again, the first ever Rocky player to be featured on a ballot and be recognized as a Rocky at the time, Dale Murphy, of for 15 years. So he made the maximum amount of appearances. Now, Goose Gossage, believe it or not, is he sort of served somewhat as an assistant to the GM in 2003. A little bit of a different role than what Vinny Castilla does today. So you can kind of, retroactively give him some credit as being a Colorado Rocky, but it's very hard to find any information on anything that he did in the Rockies organization. So that was kind of a, hey, we as an organization can benefit from having your name attached to us, but it was very brief for 2003. Now, Dale Murphy, again, probably going forward, even still, would have to get in on a Veterans Committee ballot. He has probably the best case going forward of any Rockies player who's already been featured on a ballot. 18.6% was the highest he had ever achieved. Again, was the maximum 15 years on a ballot. Won back-to-back MVPs, is one of only, I want to say we're up to 11 players now that have won back-to-back MVP awards. He is one of them, and is obviously in good standing, a nice guy, very well liked by his teammates. And I think there's a chance, because these narratives definitely build over time, where people make a push and say, hey, you know what, we really need to reconsider this guy's Hall of Fame resume. I think Dale Murphy could be that guy, considering all the home runs he hit during the 1980s and only finished a couple home runs shy of 400 home runs, which again is not a lock for the Hall of Fame, but Then again, neither is 500, neither is 700, right? Ask Alex Rodriguez about hitting 700 home runs and going into the Hall of Fame. So Larry Walker, first player who gets in. We were all there for both him. We were there for Todd Helton earlier this year, celebrating, watching that announcement. Walker, January of 2020, gets elected, the big announcement, then has to wait many, many months, 21 months, I believe, until September of 2021 to get in. He received 76.6% of the votes, barely got over that 75%, but Rockies fans, of course, will take that, getting in his 10th and final year on the ballot. Flash forward to just this past January, Todd Helton, 79.7%. So a little bit more than Larry Walker. Helton getting in his 6th year on the ballot. So what about Jim Leyland? Well, again, he's actually the second Colorado Rocky selected to the Baseball Hall of Fame, because the Veterans Committee, when they met for the class of 2024, they met in December. That vote was finalized in December. So the announcement that Jim Leyland was going to be a Hall of Famer came a full month before Todd Helton's announcement about him going to Cooperstown. So yes, Jim Leyland, the second Colorado Rocky to be selected for the Hall of Fame, was the manager for one very brief year in 1999. I think it was a 3-year deal that he had signed, but walked away in '99 after 1 year. It was rough for him. Now he needed to get a yes vote from 12 of the 16 members of the Veterans Committee. 12 divided by 16 is 75%. He received a vote from 15 of the 16 members of that committee. So he got 93.8%. So you can also say, of all the 3 Rockies Hall of Famers, who got the highest percentage to get in? Jim Leyland would be the answer, 93.8%. What other players, or what other non-players, what other managers, coaches could get in via Veterans Committee? I think Don Baylor, quite possibly has a case if you're looking at it from the spectrum of being the first manager of the organization. Again, it's more for his contributions from baseball. That one could be a hard one to make. Baseball lifers like Don Zimmer. He was the bench coach for the original Colorado Rockies for several years, working alongside Don Baylor and helping the team at that point then from losing 100 games, something that they really did not want to do, even as an expansion team. They were successful in that. I think going back to the players, Andres Galarraga is an interesting player that somewhat of a case, I think, could possibly be made for him going forward. Now, I don't think that'll happen anytime soon. I can just see us being in a world in which we look at the late 80s, 90s, early 2000s and say, man, there's not a lot of players who represent that era. And so much of that, of course, has to do with PEDs and it being the steroid era. And if the Baseball Hall of Fame wants to induct some players during that era that do not have those same ties to steroids, like a Manny Ramirez, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, etc., if they wanted to do that, maybe you can make the case that Andres Galarraga is that guy. A really cool feature on Baseball Reference, all the way at the bottom, is similarity scores, looking at a career statistics and looking at individual year statistics and comparing them to other players. And when you look at the players most similar to Andres Galarraga, the similarity scores in the top 10, there are 3 players that are Hall of Famers that are in his top 10, and a lot of other players you would certainly consider in the Hall of Very Good. Orlando Cepeda is number 1, Hall of Famer. Paul Konerko deserves a lot more credit. Carlos Lee, Jim Rice, Hall of Famer. Joe Carter, Hall of Very Good. Aramis Ramirez, Jason Giambi, MVP winner and PED user as well. Willie Stargell, Hall of Famer. Joey Votto might get himself into Cooperstown at some point. And then Chili Davis. So a lot of really good players that are similar to a guy like Andres Galarraga, who already won comeback player of the year, came back from cancer. So I think there is somewhat of a narrative there for a guy who was a 5-time All-Star, 2-time Gold Glove winner, 2-time Silver Slugger winner, won a batting title and was really the first star of the expansion era in the 1990s, the first star for the Colorado Rockies. All right, well, who's up next for the Rockies in Cooperstown? In next year's ballot, 2025, there are a total of 5 players who could possibly be on that ballot. Not all of them will make it, I don't believe, but 5 are eligible because they do meet that criteria. Troy Tulowitzki, I feel pretty confident will be on that ballot. Carlos Gonzalez as well. Those were, 2 of the best players in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Will they make the Hall of Fame? I think we all know that there's a low probability of that at all. Mark Reynolds, had himself a quality 10-plus-year career. A lot of folks probably on this call are squinting, thinking about how many times he struck out in his career, but still very much accepted in today's game. Ian Desmond, multi-time All-Star, really great player. Career didn't really work out once he came to Denver, but still a really valued player when you consider the thoughts of his peers. And also Chris Iannetta, who is one of 2 players who had 3 different postseason stints with the Colorado Rockies. Carlos Gonzalez, of course, in 2009 and 17 and 18, and then Chris Iannetta in 2007, 2009, and 2017. I believe I've got those correct. Those are the only 2 guys. In 2026, Daniel Murphy, again, you won't think of him as a Colorado Rocky, but he should probably be on that 2026 ballot. And a guy you certainly do not think about as a Colorado Rocky. And hopefully some of you will go, I don't even know if that really happened, but it did. Matt Kemp, he was a Rocky for that very brief 2020 season. He will be eligible for the 2026 ballot. In 2027, Wade Davis, I think we could see his name on that ballot. Not so much for a Jonathan Lucroy, who was one of the better catchers of that era. John Axford is eligible. And then a player that I think make a lot of people smile. He had a great smile himself. Dexter Fowler. And then barring some kind of comeback for Greg Holland, he should be on that 2028 ballot. Well, if we're legitimately thinking about who's the next Rocky to make the Hall of Fame and to have Colorado on that nameplate there in the Great Hall, the short answer is Nolan Arenado, of course. Now, his contract is not up until 2027. So again, you add 6 years to that. 2033 would be the earliest that he gets in. Now he's, definitely on the wrong side of 30 and has suffered somewhat of a setback this year. If you look at his numbers, the finalists for All-Star Game voting were announced earlier today as we recorded this on June 27th. And Nolan Arenado, it was not a finalist. Alec Bohm and Manny Machado, who hasn't been having a great year. I think Ryan McMahon probably has been playing better than Manny Machado. Were finalists, Bohm and Machado, but Nolan Arenado still might be able to play a little bit past 2027. Should he be able to kind of stave off the deterioration of some of his abilities? Great defender, of course. Other active Rockies that have a shot at making the Hall of Fame. Trevor Story, again, still in someone in the middle of his career, probably not going to be a Hall of Famer. Chris Bryant, probably not going to be a Hall of Famer now at this point. I think there were probably long odds even when he signed with the Rockies based on the fact that, yes, was Rookie of the Year, was MVP once, but after that, wasn't really a big compiler of statistics. It really would have taken, multiple all-star seasons with Colorado for him to be a Hall of Famer. But I think any chance of that happening is probably gone. And then Charlie Blackmon, which, at first glance, you're thinking probably not, probably in the Hall of Very Good. But there are, a ton of accolades right now for Charlie Blackmon that you look at. And again, he's not getting in the first ballot. If he's able to stick around a little bit, maybe there's some argument to be made. But someone like Matt Holliday, he was just recently on the ballot, and I was speaking with someone who was teammates with Matt Holliday, and said, go back and look at those numbers. They're actually a lot better than someone like Charlie Blackmon, who really didn't get his big league career going in the positive until he was 27 years old. 2014. He was an all-star in 2014, but it was his age 27 season. That was the first time he had played over 100 games. So not a big compiler, Charlie Blackmon, but when you take some of his, power numbers with stolen bases, things of that nature, sure, you can look and say, man, he's had a really great career. Is he a Hall of Famer? The answer to that is probably no. As I said, Matt Holliday, I think he probably has a better conversation than a lot of people might realize, but was just on the ballot for the first time in 2024, only received 4 votes, got 1% of votes. So that conversation is not going to happen now, where we can look and say, man, he was a part of a lot of winning teams. Everywhere he went, was kind of a winner. Multi-time All-Star, Gold Glove Award winner, probably should have been the MVP in 2007. Had that happened, that really might have changed a lot of that conversation around someone like a Matt Holliday. Another player that, again, through a veterans committee, you could look and say, hey, maybe this would be one of those guys that could get in. Jamie Moyer. Now, when I spoke with Jamie Moyer last year at the All-Star game, which was in Seattle, he was very kind with his time, and floated that idea out to him that, like, do people talk to you about Hall of Fame? And he just kind of shrugged and he said, there's other guys that need to get in before me. Actually, really what he said was, he said, why should I be in the Hall of Fame? And I said, well, you did have, a very long career. You did win 269 games, which is kind of a rarity in that era. Again, he kind of had some overlap from the guys in the 2000s, but had a lengthy career, certainly contributed. The 4.25 ERA doesn't help. He's given up more home runs than anyone in the history of baseball, 522 home runs. But he said, you know what, for me to get in the Hall of Fame at some point, which again could happen, right? Harold Baines is in the Hall of Fame. For Moyer to get in, he sort of feels, and I agree, that other players have to get in front of him. Jim Cott getting in, I think that is maybe one domino. Of course, Tommy John getting in is another one. There are other players who've compiled and had incredibly long careers. Those guys, I think, have to get in before someone like a Jamie Moyer gets in. But it's ultimately not as crazy as it might seem. This idea that Jamie Moyer could get into the Hall of Fame. Now, totally outside of the box guys coming up, I mentioned Don Zimmer. Baseball lifers don't really get into the Hall of Fame. You could say that Joe Torre is somewhat of a baseball lifer, but he was a great baseball player, Hall of Very Good, great manager. So even just on his managing alone, that really put him in a spot to be in the Hall of Fame. In fact, I think he's actually in as a manager. But you could say a baseball lifer. Those guys aren't in the Hall of Fame, unfortunately. They're recognized, but they don't really have a place. So I don't think Don Zimmer would ever do that. Going forward, other managers that played for the Rockies for a period of time, Joe Girardi, can't forget about him, of course, the original catcher for the Rockies. He's got a long way to go, unceremoniously removed as manager of the Phillies. And Rob Thompson, Topper, has done a wonderful job there. So did win a World Series, won with the Yankees in 2009, but Joe Girardi, he's got a long way to go to make a case. Craig Counsell was a member of the Rockies organization, didn't play very much with the Rockies in the majors to begin with. He's got a long way to go, but he's certainly somebody to watch and say, hey, that was a Rocky. And then another manager who's no longer managing right now, doesn't have a job, Gabe Kapler, also a former member of the Colorado Rockies. All right. Quick question before I get to some random fun facts and wrap up things here. Great question by Shannon. What does the Veterans Committee consist of? Now, each committee is different, and they reconstruct it a lot, and they've been doing this for several years now. And they have different eras now for the Veterans Committee to kind of break things up. And they'll rotate through every 3 years or so. And it's always 16 folks that get on these committees, these era committees, as they call them now. And they're comprised of some players, some executives, some writers. And right now there are 3 era committees that they call them. One is the contemporary baseball era. That consists of a period from 1980 to the present day. There's the classic baseball era, consisting of the period just before 1980 and including the Negro Leagues and pre-Negro League stars. And then there's also a second contemporary baseball era that considers managers, executives, umpires, which is what we just had. Joe West was on that ballot. The next one coming up for the class of 24 is just the classic baseball era. So that's going to be for folks before 1980. And then next December for the class of 2026 will be players. So that's where it's going to get crazy again with Curt Schilling, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, maybe even Dale Murphy getting on that ballot. So those are the era committees that we have. And again, you still need 75%. So with 16 people on those committees, you got to get 12 of those 16 player votes. Brian saying in the chat, yeah, Richie Allen, I think he was one vote shy this last. So not in December of 23, but of 22, he was just one shy of getting his 12 votes. And so he now has to wait. And unfortunately, when he gets in, it'll be posthumously because unfortunately he has passed away. All right, some fun facts, trivia, and quote, well, that's something for you. All right, 2016, the 2016 Hall of Fame ballot featured the sons of two former Rockies coaches. I'll give you a chance to think about who they were. One got in the Hall of Fame as a first ballot guy. Probably should have been the first 100% vote player. That was later on Mariano Rivera. But one player got in, one player did not. And that second player had a really solid career. Go back and look at his numbers and you'll say, shoot, for a catcher, he was really solid. Well, in 2016, the two former Rockies coaches were Ken Griffey Sr., his son, Ken Griffey Jr., was on the 2016 ballot, and Fred Kendall, his son, Jason Kendall, was on the ballot. In 1999, the Colorado Rockies, believe it or not, 99 wasn't a very good year for them in the win-loss column, but that it had the most Hall of Famers on one roster for the Rockies. 1999, all three of the Rockies were there: Larry Walker, Todd Helton, and Jim Leyland. I went through and crunched the numbers of when all of these guys on ballots were on the Rockies, what year. Now, the last season that the Rockies rostered a player who has appeared on the ballot was actually not 2018. Again, think about that math of 6 years, 2024 minus 2018. It was actually 2016 that the Rockies last had a player who's featured on a Hall of Fame ballot, and that was just two. It was manager Walt Weiss, who was also a Colorado Rocky as a player, the only former Rocky who played and managed. And it was one other player who was on the Hall of Fame ballot and was on the 2016 roster. You probably forgot about him, and maybe that's for a good reason, but Jose Reyes. Jose Reyes did not play a game for the Rockies, but he was on their 40-man. He was still a protected player, or not a designated player. The name is escaping me because he was being suspended basically at that point for a domestic violence charge. But 2016, two guys who were on a Hall of Fame ballot. Now, 4 different seasons, Colorado Rockies had featured 9 different players or coaches that have appeared on the ballot: 94, 95, and 2001 and 2002. It didn't really help them out by winning percentage. Only the 95 Rockies were good, right? They made the postseason, 5th best record. They had a winning record, went to the postseason. They were all comprised of 7 players and 2 coaches. Now, only 2 catchers. Before last year when Elias Diaz was an all-star and then later became the All-Star Game MVP, which was astounding. Thought he was only going to get 1 at-bat. Boom, hits a home run, becomes the MVP. The Rockies have long been considered as a team that have just never had really good catchers. And I think that pretty much checks out. But believe it or not, they've had 2 different catchers, players, that have made the Hall of Fame ballot. One received a couple votes, one did not. Who are they? Charles Johnson was on a Hall of Fame ballot, did not receive a vote. And the other one, which you may have forgotten he was a Rocky or may not have even known it, Sandy Alomar Jr. Yeah, for a brief year there in the second half, for pretty much 2 months, never even hit a home run with the Rockies. But he would have been a Rocky if he would have gotten in the Hall of Fame. On his plaque, it would have said Colorado. He actually got 16 votes, 2.8%. So the answer to that trivia question, who's the only Rockies catcher to receive a vote for the Baseball Hall of Fame? The answer is Sandy Alomar Jr. Now, the first year that the Rockies ever had two players on a Hall of Fame ballot, 2007, Dante Bichette and Brett Saberhagen. It's also the first year that two different Rockies received a vote. The first year with three different Rockies on a ballot, that would have been 2010, Andres Galarraga, Ellis Burks, and Todd Zeile. Burks and Galarraga got at least a vote, no votes for Todd Zeile. Most Rockies on the same ballot, 2013, there were 7. You had the Walkers, Larry and Todd, Jeff Cirillo, Sandy Alomar Jr., Steve Finley. Yes, he was on the 2007 Rockies. Jose Mesa and Royce Clayton. Only 3 of those players even received vote. The last year that the Rockies, before 2016, didn't have a player on the ballot, it would have been 2015. Other years where there were no Rockies on a ballot, Rockies players, that is, 2008, 2004, 2002, and then, of course, every year before 1999, every year before Dale Murphy. If you are including coaches like Amos Otis, then 96, 93, and every year before 1990. Hall of Fame ballot snubs, if you want. Bud Black, believe it or not, never appeared on a Hall of Fame ballot, but some of you may know now that he is the only player in baseball history to win 500 games as a manager with 2 different clubs and win 100 games as a pitcher. So Bud Black in a class unto himself, but despite playing for 10 seasons, was never on a ballot. Here are a couple Rockies, but they weren't really Rockies to appear on a ballot. To clarify, a couple of players who you may have forgotten represented the Rockies, in spring training or had some kind of connection to the Rockies. Jorge Lopez, he was a non-roster invite to spring training, as was Paul LaDuca. Both those guys made a Hall of Fame ballot. Brad Ausmus, believe it or not, he was taken by the Rockies in the 1992 expansion draft, played at Colorado Springs in AAA, was traded in that 93 season, so he never actually played with the Rockies, but he was in the organization. As I mentioned earlier, Jason Kendall and Ken Griffey Jr., sons of former Rockies coaches. Casey Blake was a non-roster invite to spring training one year. Ryan Howard, yes, he played with the Albuquerque Isotopes in AAA one year towards the end, trying to get back to the majors. Never played with the Rockies. And then finally, another player, very easily the worst trade that the Rockies have ever made. I know some of you are saying, is it the one that involved $50 million? Not exactly. But the worst trade the Rockies ever made was acquiring Kamara Barti from the Angels, who they didn't get very much out of in Barti. And they gave away a very talented player who was an all-star and eventually did make a Hall of Fame ballot. He was very good. You might remember him. Sean Figgins. Yeah, drafted and developed by the Colorado Rockies. He was on the 2020 ballot. So those are sort of Rockies, but not Rockies. Now, just to wrap up here, a couple random little notes that I have before we open up our conversation, other Rockies things or questions you might have, other news in baseball today. How did the other 1990s expansion teams fare with getting, players on a ballot? The Florida Miami Marlins, well, of course, they had Trevor Hoffman that they took in that expansion draft. That was pretty good. Arizona didn't have anyone really of note that had been on a Hall of Fame ballot that they took in the expansion draft. But Tampa Bay had both Bobby Abreu, who they did immediately trade away for Kevin Stalker to the Phillies, and the Devil Rays at the time also took Randy Winn in that draft. Other Rockies in Hall of Fames besides Larry, Todd, and Jim Leland. The Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame features 3 different Rockies. Larry Walker, Justin Morneau, who was inducted into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame in 2020, and Jeff Francis, most recently in 2022. In fact, I went back and looked for some more names. Jeff Francis is technically in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame twice because the 2015 men's national team was voted in. And Paul Quantrill, father of Cal Quantrill, is also in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. The Mexican Baseball Hall of Fame features 2 former Rockies, Vinny Castilla, class of 2020, and Armando Reynoso, class of 2010. The Caribbean Baseball Hall of Fame, which I couldn't find very much information on, and I don't even think they have a brick and mortar location anywhere, but Nefi Perez was inducted into that in 2012. Venezuelan Baseball Hall of Fame has inducted Andres Galarraga. The Cuban Baseball Hall of Fame, no Rockies there, but 6 different Cuban-born players have appeared for the Colorado Rockies at some point. The Puerto Rican Baseball Hall of Fame, that seems like something that should exist, but I think it disbanded, and they don't really have anything going on right now. It only existed from 1991 to 1996. The Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame, no former Rockies there. Rockies have had 5 different Japanese-born players, the last of which came in 2007, Kaz Matsui. And believe it or not, the first 2 Japanese-born Rockies, I believe, were born on a some kind of military base in Japan, because their names are Jeff McCurry and Craig House. Other than lefty O'Doul, who was inducted to the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame in 2002, other non-Asian players who have been elected were Alex Ramirez and Randy Bass, who were both recently elected in. Wally Yanomine, who some of you may be familiar with that name. He was born in the Hawaiian Territory in 1925. Japanese parents, actually signed a contract as a running back with the San Francisco 49ers back in 1947. But ultimately, yeah, there are no former Rockies that are in the Japanese Baseball Hall of Fame. For anyone who's interested, I can send you my list of 53, 54 if you want to count Goose Gossage, different members of the Rockies organization who have appeared on a Baseball Writers Association ballot. But yeah, that's that. If anyone has any questions, comments, feel free to fire them out if there are any comments that I may have missed. I think I got all those comments.
Hey, Patrick, that was awesome.
John, thank you, man.
That was great. I had a couple names. I started writing things down. It when popped into my head, and I'm wondering, did Eric Burns ever get on a ballot? Probably not. Preston Wilson? No.
Preston Wilson also did not. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. Steve Finley?
Yes. Yep. He was on the 2013 ballot.
And recently I shared that I found the book from the 25th anniversary, and there was a picture of the scouts, and Tom Wheeler was in the picture, and Joe Niekro was in that picture too. I'm sure there are a lot of different scouts who've been in the organization that those are tough to track, but that name just popped in my head. I only found that out like a week or 2 ago. And
John, you're giving me more homework, and guess what? Thank you. I like that. Homework is not bad. You're right. Yeah, you got to go through some of the scouts because yeah, you got to Joe Niekro probably made a ballot, but Steve Finley 4 votes. Got 4 votes when he was on a ballot, believe it or not.
Well, cool. And then I'll share this last. I don't know if this ever works. Here's from the baseball card. I know the people on the call probably are aware we have a baseball card committee, and went to the baseball card show last weekend. I don't know if you can see that, but I picked up a Toby Harrah autographed card there. Oh, cool. So I just happened to have it right here. So I was interested to learn that he was part of your presentations.
Yeah, one of only a few guys to manage the team. I think, and I found this somewhere else at a different point in time. It's only been Mike Redman and Toby Harrah that have been credited as being a manager. I don't know if Baseball Reference needs to update, because that almost suggests that they've never had a manager suspended. I can even think of. So Mike Redman, when he was a manager for the Rockies for a couple games, is because Bud Black was out on the COVID protocol. So that's why he was officially out. So if you're ejected from the game, Bud Black would still get credit for that win or loss, right? Even if it was in the first inning. So I don't know the circumstances in which Toby Harrah, for it was either 2 or 4 games that he was actually credited as being manager. I don't know what happened with Buddy Bell, that he was officially out of action at that point. But that was a good one. Preston Wilson did have 10 years in the majors, but I'm wondering if he didn't have 10 years of service time, right? Because you can have 10. You could be in the majors for 10 years, but if your first 3 or 4 years you're going back up and down, to the minors, you wouldn't have service time. So I'm wondering if that actually factored into why he was never even on a ballot.
Yeah, I'll be looking at that. I'm on my phone for this call, so I'm not good enough to be on a call and be researching this stuff. But or even
Carl
doing
chimed in. Carl,
messages.
thank you. Yeah, Carl, 2 games for Toby Harrah in the year 2000. So, all right. He might, I don't know. I don't know if, I want to say he lost both of those. I want to say he was 0-2. I remember it was either Redmond or Harrah, did not have a win in their brief time as a manager filling in. 1-1. All right, 1-1 for Toby Harrah. Carl,
There's someone who
appreciate
can
you.
multitask.
Yeah, Mike Hampton. Mike Hampton also on a ballot. If you go through, and again, not including Goose Gossage, 28 different players, 28 different Rockies received at least one vote. It starts from Helton, Walker, Dale Murphy. Next most, the coach that received the most votes for the Rockies from his time as a player, Dwight Evans, 3 ballots for him. Ken Griffey Sr., 22 votes, tied with Andres Galarraga. Then you got 16 votes for Sandy Alomar Jr., 12 for Don Baylor. Jamie Moyer got 10 votes. That's 2.4% for that year. Buddy Bell got 8. Darryl Kyle 7. Brett Saberhagen 7. Vinny Castilla, Jason Giambi each got 6. Justin Morneau got 5 back when he was on the ballot in 2022. Steve Finley, Roy Oswalt, and Matt Holliday all got 4 votes. Carney Lansford, 3. Dante Bichette, 3. Ellis Burks and LaTroy Hawkins, 2. And then all getting 1 vote from someone out there. Toby Harrah, Bruce Hurst, first ever pitcher to receive a vote for the Colorado Rockies on a Hall of Fame ballot. Bruce Hurst got 1 vote. Walt Weiss, Eric Young Sr., Levon Hernandez, he was a Rocky, 1 vote. And finally, Houston Street on the 2023 ballot got 1 vote. And should also mention that despite the fact that Don Baylor did not get 5% of the votes his first year on a ballot in 94, he came back in 95 on the ballot again. So he's one of only 5 members of the Rockies organization to be on multiple Hall of Fame ballots. Not sure why, but there were a lot of those anomalies when it came to the BBWA ballot back in the day.
Patrick, I was shocked when I must have missed an earlier presentation, but you mentioned Dwight Evans. So Evans never played for the Rockies, but was he a coach?
Correct. Yeah. I looped in the official, bench coach, hitting coaches.
Yeah.
Like I said, the first 9 guys that were ever on a ballot, again, some of them retroactively were coaches. But yeah, Dwight Evans from 90 in 1994 was a hitting coach. Yeah.
Because Evans, curiously enough, for a guy that I grew up thinking of as a tremendous fielder for the Red Sox, ended up with over 400 home runs. And I mean, he sort of had a marginal case, I think, for the Hall of Fame. And
I agree.
He was related to the Rockies.
Yeah, no, I agree. That was where some of my curiosity came, is like, all right, well, we know the players and we know who's not getting in. So let's kind of dig around the edges. How can we make some of this work? How can we look and say, well, maybe with veterans committees, again, in 25 years, you look back at the steroid era and go, Jamie Moore had a 4.25 ERA, but I mean, look who he was pitching against. Maybe we need to kind of reconsider that just a little bit. Yeah, and to your point, Greg, if you use a figure known as Jaws, which is a wonderful creation made by a guy named Jay Jaffe, who writes for Fangraphs. Chances are you probably read one of his articles when it comes to Hall of Fame time. But he has a win share kind of algorithm that can compare players from every generation based on their position. Dwight Evans, according to Jaws, 16th best right fielder of all time, has similar numbers to guys like Billy Williams, Hall of Famer, Tony Perez, and Al Kaline. So certainly the case, certainly the Hall of Very Good. Maybe one day going back and looking at some of those players in the 70s and 80s who might have been a little bit underrepresented. Dwight Evans could get in at some point. And to your point, Greg, yes, his plaque would not say Colorado anywhere on that because he was a coach.
Patrick, I hadn't thought about this until now, that I always considered, remember Biggio and Bagwell with the Astros, and I always associated, maybe I wasn't close enough to the Twins, but Morneau and Mauer, and maybe they weren't the same player, but you said Morneau got 4 votes, and Mauer makes it in on his first ballot, which I I don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's probably a Hall of Famer, but that's just me. But I didn't realize how far apart they were. And maybe I don't remember the Twins well enough, but they seem closer to that than Morneau. And I remember the Twins, and I always thought of them together like Biggio and Bagwell.
But Brian,
Yeah,
the,
good
I
point.
insert here the big thing in the difference between those two was Morneau's career was drastically interrupted by a concussion. He slid into second base, hit a knee of the fielder. He lost at least 2 years, then another year. Then he was eventually semi-released, traded to the Rockies, and then he could only hit singles. But and then he won a batting title with us, and he was every bit as good as Mauer early on, although we didn't play as.
Okay. And again, I don't have that reference, Greg. So
Yeah, I'm just telling you that
yeah,
that his career was interrupted, and
I was
right.
surprised he got 4 votes and Mauer gets in on his first ballot. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's one of those like a place in time where if you go back to those, those really good Twins teams in the late 2000s and you go, oh, both these guys, man, they could both be Hall of Famers, and their careers kind of diverged from that point, as Greg said, with the concussions. If you like wins above replacement from 2011 to 2013, yeah, Justin Morneau was only worth 1.4 wins above replacement. And that's one of the reasons why, he's kind of let go and, was able to latch on with the Rockies and wins a batting title. But then even after that batting title, he played out his second season with the Rockies because he had signed a 2-year deal, and then only had 58 more games with the White Sox at age 35. So, and whereas, Morneau obviously dinged because he wasn't able to compile because of the concussions, Mauer very much helped out, as pointed out by Joe here. He was a catcher, right? Won 3 batting titles, I believe it was, as a catcher, more than any catcher all time. So like that kind of helped him out. But if you would have asked me going into the this year's voting, would Joe Mauer get in the first ballot? I also would have said no. Hall of Famer, sure, probably. He gets in. I'm more of a big Hall guy than a small Hall guy, so sure, let him in. But I was surprised that he would have been a first ballot guy myself. Yeah, Chris Moyer chiming in. Baseball Cube, another great site. It's funny. I feel like when I started diving into baseball statistics, I was half the time on Baseball Reference, half the time on the Baseball Cube, and Baseball Reference just kind of took off, and Baseball Cube, I still use it a little bit here and there, but definitely has not had the same success as Baseball Reference. But the Baseball Cube, if you've never used it, you can get some really great information on, college baseball, high school, things of that nature. Chris Moyer pointing out that despite 10 seasons, according to the Baseball Cube, 8 seasons and 38 days of service time. So does not get the full pension, which is another interesting list of guys. You go back and look and say, hey, who's getting the full pension for 10 years of service time? There's some interesting names that are on that you may not have even heard of. Ahiri Adrianza, which is a tough name to say, but if you can try looking him up, he just recently got 10 years of service time. And yeah, I don't think he's ever played 100 games in a single season. Ahiri, Ehire Adrianza. He's getting a
Never
pension.
heard of him, Patrick.
Yeah. Active player. He's getting full pension there. He got 10 years of service.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Patrick, you said something earlier about service time. This is irrelevant to the topic, but I think people get credit for 10 days of service time. They get a percentage of the season. So that all accumulates. You don't need to have a full season. If you're up for a day, you get 162 of 0.6% of the season service time. So it all accumulates. And for Cub fans, guess what? Kyle Hendricks just got his 10th year of service time.
How about that?
Yeah, Kyle.
Yesterday.
And speaking of Cubs,
Werner, come on. Don't do that.
Speaking of Cubs and service time, this will make everyone happy, maybe. If you're on the injured list, if you're on the big league injured list, you can get service time. So that means, despite the fact that Chris Bryant is still yet to play 162 games over his 3 years with the Rockies, he's still accumulating service time. And what's also funny about that too, now I bring it up, speaking of the Rockies, there was a game in, I want to say it was 2022, where the Rockies technically, I think, had all rookie pitchers. And I say technically because one of the guy who I think he was only pitching in like his second or third game, Julian Fernandez, actually had 2 years of service time. And it may have even been his major league debut, but he had 2 years of service time because he was selected. He was pulled from the Rockies organization. He could throw 100 miles an hour back when that was a little bit more rare. I want to say it might have been, 2019 or the 2019 Rule 5 draft. I want to say it was by the Giants at that point, and was on the 60-day IL, Tommy John. So they just stashed him away. The next year rolled around. They decided they didn't want to do it. Then the Marlins said, okay, we'll do it. I may have it backwards. It might have been Marlins first and then Giants. So he had 2 years where he was on, he was getting service time for 2 years, still yet to play a game in the majors. So that's a strange one how it works. But hey, good for those guys.
That's a great story, Patrick.
Any other questions about a very thin topic that is the Rockies and Baseball Hall of Fame voting? Any other odd wrinkles or thoughts, things that came to your mind?
I'm going to add something just for the small group of people here. Larry Walker was on a tremendous trajectory. He had roughly 37% after 8 years, 57% after 9 years, an unprecedented jump from year 8 to 9. And then in year 10, the Rocky Mountain Sabre chapter pitched in, and this was, it's not right to say the chapter did it because it was two guys, mainly Manny Randhawa and secondarily Dan Evans. And Manny built the case and Dan carried it to the public so that Larry made it by 6 votes. In my opinion, pretty ignorant opinion, but all that they did certainly made the difference of that 6-vote differential that Larry made it in. So our chapter globally, but mainly Manny and Dan carried Larry over the threshold. That's not true for Todd Hill. I mean, Todd made it on his own.
Yeah, agree with you, Greg. That's a good point. The chapter, those guys pushed him through. I'm not sure he would have got there.
And we all were supportive, but none of us built the case, or had Dan's leverage to carry it to people.
Hey, Patrick, is Manny around much? I haven't seen much, but maybe I'm not paying attention.
Yep. So writes for MLB.com.
Okay.
So
you see him in the press box?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And he always was kind of in the Rockies world and half out, because Thomas Harding is the Rockies for the MLB.com. But when he's not there, Manny will jump in and but a lot of times he's covering the road team. So
okay.
Yeah, he's doing great. He's doing good.
Good. We need to hook up, Patrick. We will.
Absolutely, Brian. Looking forward to it. All right. So if something comes to you, go ahead and we can talk about it later. Otherwise, and Joe, you can chime in if you want. We did just want, part of this gathering to also just be, again, have a little presentation, and hopefully we can have some of our board members doing more stuff like this, even again, just for 20 minutes, a fun little presentation on something they already know about. If you are here now and there's something you wanted to give a presentation on, you absolutely can. And then we want to just BS a little bit and just shoot the what for 10-15 minutes, whatever it is, on anything that's on people's minds. If you want to talk about the Rockies, if you want to share your thoughts on the Rickwood Field game and the loss of Willie Mays, who's the greatest living ball player right now. If you want to have that conversation, we can kind of do that, and everyone is free to chime in with their thoughts, whether it's in the chat or you want to unmute yourself and ask a question or make a statement.
Ezekiel Tovar, is he maybe in the conversation yet?
for Hall of Fame.
for the great living player.
Yeah, right. He finished ninth. I believe he finished ninth in the voting for the All-Star game. For anyone that doesn't know, they've had a new format. And I'm not sure if last year was the first year or if it was 2021, but they basically do three phases. There's phase one and phase two are the same. They just announce it. And then after phase two, they kind of get rid of the riffraff and say, all right, let's reset everything. Top two vote getters at each position. In the case of the outfield, of course, that's six. And then for another week-long period, everybody just votes on those two guys at each position in each league. And then from there, that's how you've got the All-Star game starter. So Tovar finished ninth, Elias Diaz was eighth for catcher, and then Ryan McMahon finished in sixth. Nobody else. And Jurickson Profar, who was released by the Rockies last August, leading vote getter for National League outfielders, folks. He's a stud. Baseball, man. You gotta love it.
That's crazy. I was gonna ask where he finished because I saw that early on.
Gotta love it. So again, so he's not in the Hall of Fame, that's for sure. No, he's not gonna be starting the All-Star game yet. I think the period might start on Sunday. But it's like the final round. You go, and I think you can do like 10 votes a day online. It's online only for anyone. I think everyone in this room certainly remembers the old paper ballots, the little trifolds. I used to save them every year. You got your little, make sure you don't have a hanging chad. You'd poke it out with your scorekeeper's pencil, your little golf pencil. Those things were the absolute best. That might be the next thing I get framed behind me. This is 1987 Topps, my favorite baseball card set, uncut sheet. And I got the entire set. My wife and my parents picked this one out. That's got some of my favorite players on it. And coincidentally, Bud Black's at the top. So that definitely would have been the one that I would have picked if it were my choice. But I have to get some of the old ballots in frames because those were so cool. Now it's all digital, unfortunately.
You talked about just bullshitting, Patrick.
I didn't use those words, but go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, but I think that sort of was just chatting, Hey, things. 57, I think. And that's the unbelievably nice picture of Brooks Robinson, especially if you had an original where he's shot against a golden sky. Is this the same one? Check it. 57 Topps, Brooks Robinson. Or did you say 67?
Oh, are you talking about my cards here?
Yeah.
Oh, no, 1987.
Oh, man, you got the wrong set. All
Yeah.
right.
I'd be curious. I wonder what the oldest uncut sheets are. Oddly, valueless and rare. I
I'm
don't know
just
how
gonna
they can be both
recommend.
rare and not have any value, right? Like how can something rare not have value? But it's just one of those things. But that would be very cool, man, to get a really old uncut sheet. Come
Okay.
on.
All right, I'm sorry, but I'm just recommending to people who care about cards, and Brian's gone. Well, I'll have to tell him that Brooks Robinson card, if you could get a natural view of that, and I've looked at like 10 cards, and now they all have different hues, but Brooks is cast against a setting sky in a major league stadium, but you can see the whole sky, and it's kind of golden pink. And yeah, it's really beautiful. And he looks okay. And I think that might be his rookie card. There was a second point I was going to make. Give me about 10 seconds and I'll figure it out.
That's quicker than my dad. He usually says, "Give me 20 minutes and I'll remember." So, all right, you get 10.
You tell your dad I'm quicker than he is. Okay.
Yeah, clearly.
Tell Dennis.
Yes. Shannon saying thoughts on Willie Mays. I was at the ballpark. I think it was last Tuesday was the day. And I was at the ballpark, and I heard someone say it, and I usually can't keep my mouth shut in the press box, and I just, stunned, depressed, and maybe in a very fitting way. Before you know it, baseball was happening, and I was just watching baseball again, and the Dodgers score 7 runs, pinch hit grand slam for Jason Hayward. Teoscar Hernandez check swing should have been the final out. No, next pitch home run. Jay Cave goes crazy. So But in that moment, for that time, it was really sad. Obviously, the greatest living ball player of all time. Lucky enough I got to meet him once in 1999, Cooperstown Hall of Fame.
Really?
Put down my $75, or rather, my dad did. Stood in line, got to shake his hand, signed a ball, and just strong hands. Just remember going, wow, like that's one of the best parts about not only going to Cooperstown, but going to any event where if you pay for someone's autograph, 9 times out of 10, you should be able to at least shake their hand. You know that your autograph's real, and you can say, "Hey, I met this person," rather than just having it. That if you can get something and that's all you can do, that's great. But if you get a chance to meet someone, especially as elite as him, and you never know when you're going to cross paths with him, um, take that opportunity. So yeah, feel pretty lucky. I'm sure a lot of other folks here probably got their own favorite Willie Mays stories or interactions. Anyone
I have
want
a good friend who grew up in the Bay Area, and this is it's kind of silly, but she lived in the same area, and they'd go trick or treating to Willie Mays' house. And she's not a baseball fan at all, really. So, he was like a neighbor, and, hi, Mr. Mays, or whatever, giving out, candy. So I just always think of that when I think of him, just outside of all the baseball stuff.
When I was a
And
kid, I went to Willie Mays' house and he gave me 100 grand. He did. He gave me 100 grand. She could say that,
right.
right?
Yeah, maybe. But, um, I put a picture. So the board's been experimenting with a Slack account, which is similar to Discord server and we're gonna roll that out hopefully soon and offer that to the chapter. But one of the things I put on there was a picture that I have, and it's original photo of Willie Mays in 1954. It's one of those press photos if you've seen them, and it's got like the printout of when it was and where it was. And I did a little research on that, and it turns out I didn't know this. It's a photo, and it's the first episode of the Tonight Show. Willie Mays was a host, and it was late night, and in New York he was actually already past midnight, so it was technically the day before Game 1 of the World Series. And it's a picture of him being interviewed from his house in the limelight, and it's cool. I picked it up years ago, and I just thought it was neat. But there's no, according to my quick research online, there's no video of that part of the broadcast. But it was 54 till now. The show's still running, and Willie Mays was on the first episode, and I've got a picture of it, which is pretty cool. So
that's awesome. Was it Johnny Carson yet, or was it Jack Parr at that point?
It was Steve Allen, I think.
Yeah, Steve Allen was the first young guy, Patrick Lyons.
Gotcha.
And it was an hour and a half episode apparently, and 30 minutes of it is available. Like, they recorded it, and it's on. You can see it on YouTube, but I didn't watch the whole thing. But the whole broadcast wasn't recorded, as far as I can find.
Yeah. There is so much good stuff in the light of Willie Mays' death, but if you want to hear, there are podcasts that you can listen to for free. And one of the most interesting, I think, is one that I just heard this week. Jason Stark and Doug Glanville do a podcast called Starkville, but that's now part of The Athletic, and The Athletic has an overarching umbrella called The Windup, but you can get that for free. You can access it. And if you go that for this week, they interview Willie's biographer, and it was really interesting. And one of the things I drew from it was two things. He asked Willie, what's it mean to you that Negro League stats are now included in official MLB statistics? And he says, it means nothing to me. And he says, really? It means nothing to you? And he says, yes, it means everything to the people that never got their light shined on. And that's not an exact quote, but that was what Willie's saying. I love it because of all those other people. I got my time, which is a sign of his personality. Second thing was the guy asked Willie about his gloves, like the glove for the catch. And one thing he asked Willie, was that your greatest catch? And he says, not even in the top 5. Really? And then Willie, then he asked, well, where are your great gloves? And he says, I've given them all away. And Willie gave a lot of stuff away to kids, to sons of coaches, to everything. So, again, it's the Wind Up podcast. You can check it out if you care to. And it was the portion called the Starkville from This Week with Jason Stark and Doug Glanville. So if you care to check them out, do it.
That's cool. One thing, I'm kind of putting a couple different things together. For the Rucker Archive project, I volunteered to document and catalog some photos, and Willie Mays was the athlete that I got to I think 10 photos, and I went through, and one of them was he played for the Minneapolis Millers, I think it was. Yeah. And so I bet, so this is a plug for the National Saber Convention in the Twin Cities. I wonder if they'll have something put together for like a Willie Mays tribute, or just someone will, take advantage of the topic and the location to just talk about the minor league career of Willie Mays in Minneapolis. Because I went last year in Chicago, and it was great, and I'm looking forward to going. So I think Greg, you're planning to go, and hopefully if anyone's on the fence, that they really consider it, because it just was really enjoyable. I just love this, being able to talk to you guys, and it's like this, but 300 or 400 people there. So
Willie Mays at 20 years old in AAA with the Minneapolis Millers of the American Association, in 35 games, batted .477 in AAA. So that's crazy. Joe, if you're still here, I know you're probably working on a bunch of different Rickwood Field things. Joe was in Birmingham, Alabama for that. I don't know if you just want to focus on Willie Mays and just say a couple things. You can. If not, and you're saving it, all good.
Yeah, I think the fact, it's really hard to describe the experience at Rickwood. The place is really, it's like being in another plane of existence, and just the history of that field and the dimensions and the layout. It's right in the middle of a neighborhood where baseball parks used to be back in the day. It was not off a freeway ramp somewhere. It's not in the middle of a downtown. It's in a residential neighborhood. It's next to houses and churches and schools. That's the way baseball was back in the day. And it's a poor community. It's not a great section of town, but just the outpouring of people that came to show the respect for Willie Mays, not people who actually had tickets to the game, but just people who acknowledged how much the Black Barons meant to the city of Birmingham and how much Willie Mays meant to baseball history, especially for African Americans. And the fact that Willie died 3 days before that game took place, it's almost surreal. A big part of that game was to pay a tribute to the history of the Negro Leagues, and in particular, Birmingham's own Willie Mays. The fact that he died 3 days before just kind of made it so story-like. And it was really emotional. His son was there, and Barry Bonds, his godson, was there. It was a wonderful experience, and they really, really paid a fantastic tribute to Willie. And the day before the game, I tried to go to the Negro League Southern Baseball Hall of Fame Museum. Not the Negro League Museum that's in Kansas City, but this is the Negro Southern League that's in Birmingham. And unfortunately, it was closed to the public because they were bussing in. Do you remember at the start of the game, they had all those former Negro League players? A lot of them were pushed out in wheelchairs, and these guys are well into their 70s and 80s and what have you. So they had that museum closed specifically for those players. And it was kind of cool to actually be there. I wasn't allowed in, but to actually be there and to see those players up front and see the tribute that was paid to them. So it was just a wonderful event. For the city of Birmingham, for Negro League Baseball, and for Willie Mays in particular, it was a wonderful tribute.
Joe, I've never even heard of that museum. That's amazing. But I did find the website, so I'm gonna link that in the chat for anyone. That's amazing. I can't wait to look at that.
Yeah, I never heard of it either, actually. So, I stumbled across when I was down there.
The guy that threw out the first pitch, Beasley, and I can't remember his first name.
Gleason, yeah, Reverend Gleason, 99 years old.
Gleason, thank you. Spent 50 years as a minister afterwards. He won the last game, I believe, that Willie Mays played for the Birmingham Black.
He was the winning pitcher. You're right, Greg.
Yeah, and so this guy has a real connection to Willie. I mean, they were friends, but this guy is not. I'd never heard of him. Come on. And what are there 3 guys left from the Negro Leagues now? And he's the oldest. So something else I've noticed, and even before Willie's death or expected death, there are statisticians that think you can make a case for Willie being the best player, and in fact, probably beyond Ruth, but only compared to his godson. And then, of course, his godson has issues. And secondly, Willie lost 1 year and 3/4 to the service. I think the chances that Willie was the greatest player ever, that momentum has been growing even before his death, not just in reaction to his death. So it's pretty interesting because I don't think any of us believed 25 years ago, any of the old guys, that he was the greatest player ever. And now there's a case, even though who knows what, you can't tell.
Yeah, if you just look at wins above replacement, which again is just an indicator, Babe Ruth 162.2 wins above replacement, not play in an integrated majors, and did not have any of his seasons interrupted by service. And Willie Mays 156.2, so basically 6 wins above replacement. Difference.
Patrick,
one's a center fielder, one's a right fielder too.
Right, and Willie was a brilliant center fielder, and Willie led the league in wins above replacement for 10 years. And with the current stats, he only won 2 MVPs. I don't think that would happen now.
Very true.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Look at the data, and somehow at year 9, you would say it's about time to honor this guy.
Babe Ruth, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Led baseball and wins above replacement 11 out of 13 years, but they were not consecutive. Greg. So to your point.
Well, I didn't say Willie's were consecutive.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought you did. Okay, my bad.
They might have been, but I'm not claiming.
Anyone else with a comment? Shannon, I guess, has been to the Negro League Museum in Kansas City. Absolutely, right?
I also went to the Negro Southern League Museum down there in Birmingham in April 2022. So I got a chance to actually go see that because I know that I saw a bunch of stuff regarding the Hairston family with all the Hairston connections down in Birmingham. They had different autographed baseballs and different collections of players that were down there, and they had different uniforms like a Satchel Paige All-Stars and different uniforms that they had on display there as well. But yeah, Negro Southern League Museum. So yeah, if you happen to go back down that way, I did get a chance. I was kind of fortunate to see it. So
That's awesome. That's awesome, Chris. Sounds like something for a presentation, perhaps.
Maybe.
Maybe for the Hairston down the road for a Hairston family type thing. So
yeah, throw something together. 15 minutes. Boom. That's it.
Yeah, we'll figure something out down the road here. But yeah, they also had some type of like a little virtual pitching picture there to kind of show how different pitchers threw during that era Yeah, in the Negro Leagues down there, it was kind of neat. I'm just looking through some of my old photos that I had when I went down to that museum down there. So it was kind of, but yeah, they were focused on they also had a display on the 48 Negro League, American League champions from Birmingham, that squad as well. So
That's awesome.
handmaids stuff as well.
Patrick, I want to thank you for a great, I mean, I'm not telling you that you have to end, but I might have to end. And you did a wonderful presentation. You've been a wonderful moderator. And I mean, really mean that. And even though it's a small group, I just wonder if John, our president, wants to leave us with any thoughts about RM Saver and the direction. And probably it'll just be handled through email. But John, if you want anything, I just think it's a good time for you to
Yeah.
chip